Alain Delon, more than just a pretty face. Paris, 1976. Cannes Film Festival press conference. The man widely known as the most handsome man in the world, Alain Delon, sat at the podium. That day, a journalist said, "You're just a good-looking guy." Nobody in that room could have predicted what happened next. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The grand ballroom of the Carlton Hotel, draped in crystal chandeliers and thick cigarette smoke, was packed with over 200 journalists, photographers, and film critics. The air was heavy with expensive cologne, cheap ambition, and the suffocating pressure of being watched. At the podium sat Alain Delon, blue suit, white shirt, 40 years old and still carrying one of the most striking faces in the history of cinema. But something was different that day. There was a tiredness in his eyes that you didn't normally see, a tension locked in his jaw, years of something suppressed, something unspoken. His hands rested on the table, perfectly still, perfectly controlled. He had arrived 20 minutes early, alone, and sat in silence before anyone else entered the room. Nobody knew that. Nobody asked, except for the faintest tremor at the tips of his fingers. Nobody noticed. They were all looking at the face. Delon was discussing his latest film, Monsieur Klein, a complex portrait of a man caught in a case of mistaken identity during the Nazi occupation of Paris. A layered role, a performance that had taken years to develop. Most of the journalists in that room hadn't seen it. They were there for the photograph, the headline, the gossip. One more image of that legendary face. An Italian journalist raised his hand. "Mr. Delon, what kind of preparation did you do for this role?" Alain answered carefully, walking through his methodology, explaining the psychological architecture of the character. His voice was cold, controlled, and professional, every word chosen deliberately. The journalist wasn't taking notes. He was just staring. A second question came from an American correspondent in the third row. "You're still considered the most handsome man in Europe? What does that feel like?" Delon's jaw tightened. A microscopic shift. Only 3 people in the room caught it. "Acting has nothing to do with how you look," he said, his voice unchanged. "It's about conveying truth." The room moved on before the answer could land. Someone else already had their hand up. And that's when fate walked through the door. From the middle of the room, a French journalist stood up. 30-something, gray suit, the kind of self-assured posture that belongs to a man who has destroyed careers with a single paragraph. His name was Jean-Marc Leclerc from Paris Match. His criticism was known throughout France for being merciless. "Mr. Delon," he said, his voice cutting across the room like a blade. "I've been following your career for 15 years. Plein Soleil, Rocco, Le Samouraï. I've seen them all." Alain waited. He knew the compliment wasn't coming. "But honestly," Leclerc continued, pressing each word down like a thumb on a bruise, "I've never believed you were a talented actor." The room froze. 200 people stopped breathing at the same moment. Leclerc didn't stop. "You're just a good-looking guy. The camera loves you, directors love you, women love you, but that's not acting. That's genetic luck." Silence. Alain Delon did not move. His expression did not change. His eyes locked onto Leclerc, cold, measuring, giving nothing away. But inside, something was happening. 15 years, 52 films, 18-hour days, months preparing for a single role. Blood, sweat, and bone. And this man is calling it luck. 10 seconds passed. Nobody spoke. Leclerc pushed further. "Look at Marlon Brando. Look at Al Pacino. Those men act. You exist. You stand in front of a camera and look beautiful. That's it." And here's the part nobody ever talks about. Under the table, Alain Delon's fingers curled, barely, invisibly, so slightly that only he felt it. 20 years of iron discipline was developing its first hairline crack. But his face showed nothing. Still cold, still clean, still unreadable. His director, Joseph Losey, seated beside him, moved to intervene. Delon raised one hand. Small, decisive, final. "I've got this." Then he spoke. His voice hadn't changed. Still that cool, professional tone. But inside it now was something else. Something forged from steel, controlled, precise. "Mr. Leclerc," he began slowly, "you said you've seen my films." "Yes, all of them. Most of them." "Then tell me something." Delon leaned forward, just a few inches, but the entire room felt the shift. In Plein Soleil, after Tom Ripley kills Philippe, in the scene that follows, what expression was on my face? Leclerc paused. He hadn't expected a question. I don't exactly remember." "You don't remember?" Delon repeated it, not as an accusation, just as a fact. "Then tell me, in Le Samurai, while Jeff Costello sits in the church waiting for the man he's about to kill, how many times did I blink?" Silence. "You don't know. We shot that scene 47 times. 47. Because director Jean-Pierre Melville needed Jeff's eyes to be completely empty. No thought, no feeling, just function, a killing machine. 46 takes, they said it was too human. Take 47 was right. But the thing nobody knew, the thing that changes everything." Alain Delon rose from his chair, slowly, without aggression, but the entire room held its breath. "Mr. Leclerc, you're a journalist. You write words. You generate ideas. And if your readers didn't like one set of words, you chose different ones. But as an actor," he paused, "let it breathe. When I'm building a character, I have nowhere to hide. The camera sees everything, every thought, every hesitation, every false moment. There's a 20-foot screen and your face is on it. Every pore, every muscle, every lie." Leclerc leaned back in his chair, uncomfortable, but too proud to show it. "In Rocco and his brothers," Delon continued, his voice now carrying the slightest edge. "Not anger, but weight. Luchino Visconti asked me to kill the woman I loved, not just to perform it, to feel it. Every night before shooting, I spent 2 hours thinking about who Nadia was, why Rocco loved her, why he had to be the one to end her. And then, when the cameras rolled, when my hands were around her throat." He stopped. His eyes went somewhere else for a moment, drawn back into that memory. "I cried, real tears, because as Rocco, I genuinely loved that woman, and as Rocco, I was genuinely killing her." The room had never been this quiet. "You call that genetic luck. I call it—" He sat back down, eyes still fixed on Leclerc. "The most expensive profession I've ever known." That was the moment everything shifted. An older French critic in the back stood up. "Mr. Delon, I think we in the press are sometimes guilty of exactly this. Your appearance is so overpowering that it makes it harder for us to see the work underneath." Alain turned toward him, a tired half-smile. "I understand, but here's the problem. I didn't choose my face. I chose my roles, and every single role takes something from me that I don't get back." An Italian director called out from the side of the room, "Alain, when you worked with Burt Lancaster on The Leopard, what did you learn from him?" Delon's face softened. This was a real question, about craft, about the thing that actually mattered. "Lancaster taught me this. The camera amplifies everything. If you give 100%, it reads as 200% on screen, and it comes off fake. Real acting is giving 50% and trusting the camera to find the rest." But right when it seemed like it was over, Leclerc stood up again. Something unresolved still burned in him. He wasn't finished. "Okay, Mr. Delon, let's say you're right. Let's say you're genuinely talented. Answer me this." He paused, deliberate. "If you woke up tomorrow and your face was gone, burned, scarred, unrecognizable, would anyone still hire you?" The question hit the room like a thrown glass. Sharp, ugly, and intended. And everyone in that ballroom knew it had landed somewhere real, because it was the question Alain Delon had been quietly asking himself in the mirror for 15 years. Is he right? What's left without the face? Is the talent real, or have I been lying to myself this whole time? 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Delon didn't answer right away. He just looked at Leclerc, long and level and completely without performance. Then he spoke, and what he said changed the way every person in that room thought about Alain Delon permanently. Mr. Leclerc, if my face were gone, yes, probably some roles would disappear. The romantic leads, maybe. The posters. Some of the parts I've been handed because of how I photograph. But here's what I know about this business. He leaned forward again, dropping his voice just slightly, but the microphones caught every word. The best performances in the history of film have come from loss. Brando in The Godfather, aged, broken, running out of time. Pacino in Godfather Part 2, alone, paranoid, hollowed out by power. And the truth is, my best work probably hasn't happened yet. It'll come when I've lost something, when there's nothing left to hide behind. He stopped, and then for the first time all afternoon, he smiled. Not the star's smile, something quieter and more real. Because that's when you finally see what's actually there. And you'll see that I was never just a pretty face. I was always a storyteller. The face was just the first page. What you've heard so far is only half the story. After the press conference ended, Delon walked back to his hotel alone. No entourage, no escort, just him in an elevator, looking at his own reflection in the polished metal doors. Still that face, still that face. But for the first time in years, it felt like a weight. In his suite, he poured a scotch, walked to the window, and looked out at the Mediterranean. The lights of Cannes scattered across the water like thrown coins. The phone rang. His manager. Alain, it's all over the wire. What you said to Leclerc, people are calling it extraordinary. Everyone's on your side. What did Leclerc say? He's asking for an apology meeting. Wants to do a full interview in the magazine. Delon laughed, a short, dry sound with nothing warm in it. No, I don't owe that man anything. He hung up. The phone rang again. Director Joseph Losey. Alain, you were extraordinary today. The way you defended yourself, it was its own kind of art. Joseph, I have a question. Go ahead. If I weren't good looking, if I'd walked into your office without this face, would you have hired me? A long silence, the kind that means someone is deciding whether to be kind or honest. Then Losey, carefully, honestly, at the start, probably not, but now, after 10 films together, without question, because now Alain Delon isn't just a face, he's a force, and forces don't need to be beautiful. They just need to be true. The line went quiet. Delon set the phone down on the nightstand without hanging it up. He could hear the faint crackle of the open line in the darkness. He just sat there, in the chair by the window, the Mediterranean black and infinite below him, and let the silence do its work. And the truth, the real truth, was harder than anything he'd said out loud. The next morning, Leclerc's piece ran in Paris Match. The headline, Alain Delon, the man behind the face. It opened with something approaching an apology, but then, unexpectedly, it became something else entirely. Leclerc had written, "Yesterday I was unfair to Alain Delon, but in being unfair, I learned something. Real talent is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. And sometimes behind the most luminous face in a room, there is the darkest, most grinding work imaginable." I said Delon wasn't an actor. I was wrong. He is a painter, and his body is the canvas. Delon read it over breakfast, didn't smile, folded it once and dropped it in the trash. Because he didn't need it anymore. He was 40 years old, and for the first time, he understood something clearly. It didn't matter whether anyone else believed in the talent. What mattered was that every single day, he walked in front of that camera and left something of himself behind. Real pieces, real weight. And one day when the face was finally gone, those pieces would still be there. In the films, in the characters, in the silences between the lines. And that was the day the real Alain Delon was born. Paris, 2023. Alain Delon is 87 years old. The face that launched 1,000 magazine covers has aged, lined, and softened into something more human than beautiful. But when you watch Plein Soleil, when you watch Le Samurai, when you watch Rocco and his brothers, you don't see a pretty face. You see a craftsman. You see a man who understood something most people never figure out. That beauty is a door. It gets you into the room, but it can't keep you there. Only the